October is Adopt a Shelter Dog Month, and our resident veterinarian, early show correspondent, Dr. Debbye Turner Bell, is here to help us all find the perfect pet for our families. Good to have you with us this morning. And you have actually some friends who need a home.
That's right. We have gorgeous dogs. And let me introduce them to you. Over here on your left, this is Rocky, who is a poodle mix. Rocky's 2 years old, I believe. Is that right, Anne-Marie? You've got Cody right here, a Pomeranian, purebred Pomeranian. You can get purebreds at shelters. I have Mr. Flops, which, you know, the ear gives it away.
I'm kind of in love with Mr.
Flops is adorable, 10 years old, really needs a home, as well as Nick, the boxer mix, who is 5 months old, a little puppy. So we have a wide variety of dogs here, as you will find at your local shelter.
And I love that you brought it. This is always my point I make to people when they say I need a pure breed, because some people do for obvious reasons. There is a rescue group, or you can find one at a shelter. How do you know, though, that you are at a reputable or a good shelter when you're ready to find a pet?
Before I answer that, let me just say this. Every animal at a shelter, no matter the condition of the shelter, needs a home. So you want to give them a chance. However, you have a better result if you go to a shelter that really pays attention to what they're doing and knows what they're doing. So you want to look for a shelter that is clean. You want to look for a shelter where the people are friendly and knowledgeable. They are going to ask you more questions almost than you will ask them. You also, it's good to find a shelter, if you can, that has a staff veterinarian, or at least a veterinarian that's there on a regular basis, and a staff behaviorist is all the better, because 60% of animals that end up in shelters, in most cases, end up there because of behavior problems. So it's great if they have a behaviorist there that can temperament test the animals and properly place them with the right family.
And then you can understand, too, perhaps what that behavioral issue was. So let's start off then, when you go in, there are all these things you need to know. What are the questions we need to ask when we get there, when we've found a pet that we love?
You need to do your homework, and you want to know the background of the dog. Sometimes dogs end up in shelters, and the shelters just don't know their background, but sometimes they do. So you want to know where the dog came from, how long they've been in the shelter. You want to know what their living situation and their living condition was before they got there. You also want to ask about the medical history of this dog. Does the dog has a chronic disease, diabetes, heart disease, something ongoing that you need to be prepared for?
Do you need to worry about medication?
You need to worry about medication. You want to make sure the dog has been vaccinated, dewormed, spayed, and neutered. You also want to ask about the behavior of the dog since they've been at the shelter. Are they outgoing? Are they friendly with other dogs? Or do they act fearful and hide in the back of the cage? You also want to ask the shelter for their follow-up services. Do they offer behavior training classes? Will they do consultations if you run into something in the future? And then finally, you want to ask the shelter about their return policy. Many good shelters do have a return policy because they want that dog to be in a good home, and they don't want it to end up abandoned. And so, for instance, the Humane Society of New York, who has graciously brought all these dogs, will take the dog back if it doesn't work out. In fact, Mr. Flops here was adopted out 10 years ago. The family was not able to care for them now in their present situation. Humane Society took them back, so you want to know about that.
Mr. Flops, we're going to find you another good forever home.
That's right.
I wish I had room for another dog. What should you then do when you're going in? What should you be prepared for in terms of questions that they're going to ask you, and documentation you may need to have, because you can't just walk out the door necessarily with a dog.
These days, you almost have to give your blood type and fingerprint to get a dog, and it's for the good of the dog. So expect an extensive application process. They're going to ask you about your living conditions, your financial condition, to make sure that you can financially handle this animal. They're going to ask for references, and a good shelter will check those references. And they'll ask you a lot of questions about what your expectations are. Who else lives there? Do you have small kids or old kids?
What your plan is for taking care of the dog.
That's exactly right. You also want to expect some shelters to do a home visit, because they want to go and see the environment. Do you have a fenced-in yard so that the animal has a place to run? Expect to have an adoption fee. And this usually just covers the cost that the shelter had to incur to take in the animal and care for them. This can be anywhere from $50 to $150 or more.
Some of that cost, though, correct me if I'm wrong, sometimes it will include your spaying or your neutering, because this is also something that shelters and rescue groups are doing to help keep the pet population down.
That is absolutely right. And a good shelter, you bring up a very good point, will have already spayed and neutered the animal unless they're too young. In many cases, they will have made preparations with you to bring the animal back and get them spayed and neutered when it's time.
When we adopted our dog, he was 3.5 months. That happened with us. They also made us sign a form, which I thought was interesting, you know, making us state whether or not we had any intention of any big life changes that I hadn't thought about. Will you move? Will you have a child? Will you get married? Because that all has an impact on your pet.
Yes. You know, there are 8 to 12 million homeless pets here in the United States. Half of them, think about that, 4 million, 5 million are euthanized every year because there's just not enough good homes. So shelters don't want to see these animals abandoned again, and they're going going to go to great lengths to make sure that the prospective pet owner knows what they're getting into. Also, some shelters will do follow-ups. They'll call you a month later or 3 months later and say, how's it going? How are things? Can we help you in any way? And that's another hallmark of a great shelter.
And then the hallmark of a great pet parent, what's the most important thing we can do when we bring this dog home?
The most important thing you do is be prepared for what you're actually getting and to do your homework. Of course, you want to match the dog to your family, to your lifestyle, make sure you have the right dog and right breed. And more than anything, just make sure you're prepared for the commitment so that it is a lifetime, happy, forever home.
Because they are sweet, sweet little souls who need a lot of love.
That's right.
Debbie, great to have you here, and so nice to have all of our friends here as well who need a home. So if you're interested in adopting any of these dogs, again, they are right now at the Humane Society of New York. Log on to our website at earlyshow.cbsnews.com. You will find all the information you need right there to bring one of these friends home with you. Or